Despite Morgan Gibbs-White turning up to Nottingham Forest training yesterday wearing navy and blue, he is still very much a Forest player, and this transfer is turning into a saga. I'll bring you the latest news, including how Marinakis tried to squeeze more money out of Daniel Levy, who was, of course, having none of it. Meanwhile, the recruitment team's search for the perfect number 6 rolls on. I'll bring you news on our latest bid for the most exciting young central defensive midfielder in Britain. All this and more on today's episode of Daily Tottenham Transfer News. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening wherever you are. If you're on YouTube, please do give this video a like. Please do subscribe to the channel and press the bell button to get notifications for all of my daily content. Also, in the description box below is a link to the Football Content Awards. I would love it if you're into my content, if you could give me a nomination for a couple of those awards. All the info, as I said, in the description box below. But like I said, the Morgan Gibbs-White saga rolls on. Nottingham Forest claim that Tottenham violated Premier League rule T.1, which states, this is according to Tom Allnut, reputable journalist, that no club may approach a player still under contract without prior written consent from their club. The Premier League has not given a timeline on when that case will be concluded. Well, let's take that as it is. For a starting point, I will remain true to what I said. And I was really pleased actually yesterday listening to the View from the Lane podcast with Danny Kelly, because Danny Kelly, and make sure you listen to that podcast, give it a subscribe because it is brilliant. Danny Kelly, the presenter, asked a question of the Nottingham Forest beat reporter from Reach. So basically the Forest reporter who deals with all of their daily news. He asked him, why are Nottingham Forest claiming that Tottenham violated anything when, if this NDA is true, the NDA that apparently was put on this release clause, then surely the issue is with either Morgan Gibbs-White himself or his agent. So Forest have now obviously launched this legal bid saying that Tottenham have violated T.1, which states that no club may approach a player still under contract without prior written consent from the club. I would be absolutely shocked if this went anywhere, because in reality, as you could see, as I mentioned, I think in yesterday's video, as you can see, if you go through David Ornstein or Fabrizio Romano's timelines, all club to club dealings when it comes to transfers happens last. And the reality is that clubs know that their players, especially if they've got release clauses, are going to be talked to by other clubs, or more realistically, their agents are going to be telling other clubs about the release clause. Stefan Borson, who is a kind of Premier League financial expert and really excellent, makes excellent content, particularly around kind of the legalities of possible penalties when it comes to Premier League clubs. So he makes a lot of content about the Manchester City 115 and the fact that Chelsea admitted financial wrongdoing under Roman Abramovich. That was when Todd Bowley and Clearlake took over, and we're still waiting to find out what those penalties are. Well, Stefan Borson said this: Nottingham Forest's formal complaint with the Premier League over Gibbs-White is meaningful and a real escalation. It could be a request for the Premier League board to commence an investigation or disciplinary proceedings, or a request for arbitration. Either way, it is potentially serious, very serious, if it does not get withdrawn. So those of us who are thinking that this is just, Nottingham Forest chairman Marinakis trying to, have a shot across the bows of Tottenham Hotspur, maybe I've understated it a little bit. Maybe I've been not quite taking it as seriously as I need to, because he has actually put in that complaint, and it is, as Stefan Borson says, meaningful and a real escalation. Meanwhile, Nottingham Forest have told Tottenham not to make any further contact with Morgan Gibbs-White. How do you feel about all this from here? For me, I just think I blame Nottingham Forest wholly. I released a TikTok yesterday about it, saying I thought that Nottingham Forest were acting like small fry in terms of a club, because, like I said at the top here, it's their fault. They put the £60 million release clause into this contract. What are they going to do when they do that? They're going to be like, oh, we trust the agent to not break an NDA. Well, why would a release clause be put into this if they didn't think there was a high chance that if he played well, clubs would be interested in buying him? It's completely ridiculous. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. According to Graham Bailey, Morgan Gibbs-White has, though, made it clear to Marinakis that he wants to join Tottenham. And that will be, for me, the key element of this saga. The player wants to come to Tottenham Hotspur. And as a result, you can already see it on social media. Nottingham Forest fans are absolutely livid with him and they don't want him at the club anymore. They're saying, a lot of them, let him go, get him out. We don't want anything spoiling the good morale within the club. And that is why I think yesterday reports came out that Nottingham Forest apparently attempted to resolve the conflict with Tottenham Hotspur over Morgan Gibbs-White amicably, but failed to do so. And as a consequence, that's when they sent their explosive letter to both Spurs and the Premier League, threatening legal action. Now, for me, what that means is that yesterday or over the weekend, Marinakis and the Nottingham Forest board reached out to Tottenham Hotspur. And when they say they wanted to clear it up amicably, what they mean is, we want you to give us 10 million or 5 million pounds, probably 10 million pounds over the 60 million pounds in the release clause. And can you imagine how Daniel Levy will have replied to that? He'd have been like, no, mate, I'll take my risk in the courts. And actually, I imagine there'd be a bit of Daniel Levy rubbing his hands with glee. This is the stuff that gets him out of bed in the morning, Daniel Levy. He loves to prove that he is the best and the most successful businessman in the Premier League. He loves to prove his experience. He loves to prove exactly what he knows compared to everybody else. So he would have said, I'm not paying any more money than the 60 million pounds that you guys were naive enough to put in a triggered or in a soon-to-be triggered release clause in Morgan Gibbs-White's contract. So like I said, I think it will have turned Daniel Levy on for Marinakis to try and squeeze more money out of him, because he'd been like, I've been here hundreds of times before, mate. You are getting nothing out of me, and I'll take my chances on the Premier League arbitration or disciplinary proceedings. In terms of that, Tom Allnutt came out yesterday and said the Premier League has not given a timeline for when the Morgan Gibbs-White case will be concluded. But Thomas Frank will hope that he can have the playmaker in the squad for the club's pre-season tour. As mentioned before, Gibbs-White understood to be ready to embark on a fresh challenge at Tottenham. Well, Tottenham's first pre-season friendly is this Saturday, 3 p.m. away at Reading. And then I think they go off to Asia for the pre-season tour probably a week or 10 days later. So really going to be interesting to see what happens in the next few days over this. I should say I'm not usually one to... I don't love what Simon Jordan does on TalkSport. He's obviously incredibly opinionated and somewhat of a contrarian. However, he did talk yesterday to Jim White about how Tottenham and Daniel Levy have previous on this front. When it comes to when he was chairman of Crystal Palace, he accuses Daniel Levy of doing similar and tapping up Wayne Routledge. Well, listen, let's put it this way. Daniel Levy and Tottenham didn't get any Premier League fine or ban because of that, nor did they when they tapped up or spoke to John Bostock of Crystal Palace before, and nor have Marinakis and Nottingham Forest when they have no doubt spoken to players' representatives before speaking to the clubs of players they want to buy. It's just the reality of modern day football. It's the reality of modern day freedom of movement. As an example, it's not really that different. If I'm working in an office job and I see a job application, I apply for it, I then go and have an interview with that potential employer without telling my current employer. That's how it works. It's freedom of movement. And I don't think in reality the Premier League are going to come out at the end of all this and say anything different. There won't even be a fine, I don't think, for Tottenham. Nothing will happen, and I imagine it will all get dealt with in the next week. Tom Barkley also said Nottingham Forest have been attempting to get Morgan Gibbs-White to sign a new contract for the full last year, which would have removed or increased this £60 million release clause. The player is not interested in a new deal, and as I said, keen to move to Spurs, and therefore the deal is expected to happen eventually. Morgan Gibbs-White only has 2 years left on his contract. Therefore, this is the summer in which Nottingham Forest can get the most for that player. If they held him on somehow, if they held on to him somehow for the next year, they would only get maximum £30 million for him next summer. So in some ways, I think it's for the best for Forest as well to let him go for the 60 million and as quickly as possible. But like I said, listen, it's all subjective. Let me know how you feel about it in the comments. Let's talk about it. In terms of Tottenham's other transfer news, as I mentioned at the top, looking for that perfect number 6 and conversations, according to some reports, ongoing with Crystal Palace around Adam Wharton. And there is apparently confidence on Tottenham's side that they could get a deal done. Now, for me, I feel like I'm sure this confidence comes from speaking to Adam Wharton and his representatives. I'm sure he'd like to come to Spurs. He sees a big gaping opening in Tottenham's defensive midfield that he could fill straight away using his Premier League experience and knowing that playing for Tottenham in the Champions League would increase his likelihood of playing in Thomas Tuchel's England side. However, as I've mentioned a few times, are Crystal Palace really likely to sell Eza, Wharton, and Gay this summer? I mean, Oliver Glasner would be pulling his hair out, wouldn't he? I mean, yes, they'd be cash rich as a result, but I don't think that is what Crystal Palace are going to be wanting to do. The current offer from Tottenham, they have made an offer, is on the table. There's expectation that we could get a deal done for Wharton in the range of 65 to 75 million pounds at some point. That offer has apparently not been accepted or rejected by Crystal Palace yet, and that will be, I think, because they are waiting to find out the final fate of theirs when it comes to will they be playing in the Europa League, which they've currently been pushed out of to play in the Conference League because of their dual ownership issues. The report suggests that this will be a hard deal for Tottenham to do and that they are committed to trying to do it, but it's a crucial few weeks ahead as Spurs have set a deadline. That is why, for me, I think this is probably the least likely of all the deals for Tottenham to do this summer, but we are showing our interest, and it is a player for me that I think we should try and get now, because I feel like if we don't and we let it go on till January or next summer, a club who will be willing to pay him more wages, like Man City, like Liverpool, like Chelsea, like Manchester United even, might come in and snap him up. All right, guys, just one final bit of, I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily call it news, but something interesting that came out of one of Spurs' social media videos where they showed, I think it was the Tottenham's first day training with Kudus there, or the boys back to work training yesterday. It's been talked a little bit on social media, but in the background of one of the shots on the wall was a written list on a whiteboard of what the players had to do that day. And the last thing on the whiteboard was written, long throw audition. Now, what we know is that under Thomas Frank, Brentford were the highest scorers over a number of seasons from goals from long throw-ins. Also, they were very high up in terms of goals scored from set pieces. And Brentford last season had the best record in terms of conceding goals from set pieces in the Premier League. I think they only conceded 3. So in terms of those of us, including myself, who feel like Tottenham do not do enough work on set pieces and concede too many and don't score enough, I think that is positive news. However, how do you feel about the reality that every time Tottenham get into the final third, there's a chance that we will from now on be putting in the old crazy gang long throws? I admit I am conflicted about it. I don't personally feel like that's a Tottenham thing to do, but however, what I will say is if we start scoring goals from them, if we find one of our players can put in a brilliant 40-yard long throw, let's say it's Pedro Porro or Destiny Udogie, and then we start flicking them on and scoring goals from them, especially in big games, then I think very quickly both myself and the Spurs fan base would latch onto this and be like, no, I think this is good. You know, we are exploiting the marginal gains. We are getting extra goals. And we all know in the Premier League, if you score that first goal, you are more often likely to win than not. The stats prove it. And what Thomas Frank seems to be doing is just adding to our arsenal. But it is a little bit old-fashioned. It's a little bit Sam Allardyce, bit Big Sam. How do you feel about it? It'd be really interesting to see, won't it, in that Reading game on Saturday afternoon, whether Tottenham straight away start trying to make the most of long throw opportunities. It's not something that I can think of, certainly in the last 25 years, that Tottenham have really tried to do. But let me know if I'm wrong. Who within Spurs used to chuck in long throws? The last one I can really think of is, I think, Maurizio Taricco. Back in the late 90s, early noughties, used to have a long throw, and we used to kind of pelt it in then. That was probably back in the George Graham days. So like I said, I'm conflicted about it, but I'm definitely interested to hear how you guys as Spurs fans feel about it. So do get in the comments and let me know. All right, guys, thanks so much. It's not been the busiest of news days yesterday, so not all that much to report on other than the saga of Morgan Gibbs-White. Let's hope for some more news today and hopefully some more reports of other potential signings too. Once again, do give this video a like if you haven't already on YouTube. Please do press subscribe to the channel for daily Tottenham transfer news throughout this summer. And also do press that bell button so you get notifications about all of my content. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Come on, you Spurs.